Most people don't lose peace because something is missing from their life. They lose it because their life is overflowing. Not with joy, but with pressure, noise, expectations, and responsibilities that were never meant to be carried alone. Restlessness doesn't always come from the absence of something. Often it comes from having too much. Too many thoughts, too many comparisons, too many worries about timelines and outcomes. When the mind is crowded, even the simplest moment feels overwhelming. We are taught to look for peace by adding more habits, more routines, more productivity, more self-improvement, more information, more control. But Buddhism offers a different perspective. Peace is not found through accumulation. Peace is found through subtraction, through releasing what is heavy, what is outdated, and what quietly steals energy from the heart. In a world that pushes you to constantly become more, the real freedom is remembering you were never meant to carry so much in the first place. And now, in 2026, the world feels especially loud. Everyone is looking for relief from the noise, from uncertainty, from the feeling of being stretched thin. But the shift you're looking for isn't about transforming into a new version of yourself. It's about dissolving what never belonged to you. In this reflection, we'll explore 10 things you no longer need to carry forward, 10 quiet burdens that, when released, make room for something gentler to grow inside you. Let's begin. Lesson 1. Stop trying to control everything. One of the most exhausting habits the modern mind carries is the belief that life should unfold according to our plans. From childhood, many people learn that control equals safety, that if they prepare enough, predict enough, and think ahead enough, they can prevent pain from happening. But control is often just the brain's coping strategy for uncertainty, not a path to peace. When you try to control outcomes, timing, other people's behavior, or even your own emotions, you create a tension that never truly rests. The nervous system stays on alert, scanning for what might go wrong next, and the body tightens as if bracing for impact. The truth is that control brings temporary comfort, but long-term suffering. Because no matter how intelligent, organized, or careful you are, life moves with its own timing. People change. Circumstances shift. Chapters open and close without asking for permission. Real peace begins when you learn to separate what is yours to influence from what was never in your hands. Your actions are yours. Your intentions are yours. Your responses are yours. But the reactions of others, the speed of life, and the outcomes you desire were never meant to be held with a closed fist. This shift isn't about becoming passive. It's about becoming wiser. Instead of gripping life tightly, you respond to it with presence. Instead of demanding certainty, you move with curiosity. Instead of forcing outcomes, you allow space for things to unfold. The identity shift here is simple but profound. Calm people do not control life, they meet life. When the grip softens, the breath deepens, the mind quiets, and trust replaces panic. Peace enters not when everything goes your way, but when you stop insisting that it must. Lesson 2. Stop clinging to old versions of yourself. There is a quiet suffering many people carry without naming it, the longing for who they used to be. You may recognize it in thoughts like, I used to be stronger, I used to be happier, or I used to know who I was. This nostalgia feels harmless on the surface, but beneath it lives a subtle form of grief, the grief of comparing the present self to an outdated one. The mind resists change, not because change is wrong, but because old identities feel safer, familiar, and predictable. Yet life has never asked you to remain who you once were. In Buddhism, identity is seen as fluid, not solid. You are not a fixed character trapped in a single chapter. You are a continual unfolding, shaped by experience, awareness, and time. When you measure yourself against a former version, you create friction between who you are and who you think you should still be. This friction does not produce growth. It produces shame, pressure, and the false belief that something has been lost. But what if nothing was lost? What if something was simply transforming? Growth is not just achievement or progress. Growth is the emergence of new values, new priorities, new sensitivities, and new forms of clarity. Sometimes you become softer. Sometimes you become more discerning. Sometimes you become less tolerant of chaos or noise. None of these changes are failures. They are transitions. When you stop trying to return to an old self and instead welcome the new one that is forming, inner peace becomes possible. The identity shift here is subtle but powerful. No more chasing the past. No more demanding continuity. Instead, I welcome the person I am becoming. In that welcome, the grief softens, the heart opens, and the present finally becomes livable. Lesson 3. Stop measuring yourself against others. Comparison is one of the quietest and most corrosive forms of suffering. It does not shout. It does not disrupt your day loudly. It slips into your life through the smallest cracks, through someone's highlight reel, someone's achievement announcement, someone's calm smile, or someone's apparent stability. Suddenly, without deciding to, you begin measuring your life against theirs. Comparison creates an invisible race with no finish line and no reward. A race you never consciously agree to run, and yet it drains energy, confidence, and joy as if your entire worth depended on it. The trap is that you only see the surfaces of other people's lives. You see their milestones, their success, their ease, their progress, but you do not see their anxiety, their fears, their disappointments, their failures, or the chapters they would never post online. Every life contains suffering. This is a fundamental truth in Buddhism. But comparison makes suffering feel personal, as if you alone are behind. When that belief takes root, your timeline begins to feel wrong. Your accomplishments begin to feel small. Your pace begins to feel insufficient. But here's the shift. Contentment begins the moment you exit the competition entirely. Life was never meant to be a leaderboard. There is no universal timeline for awakening, healing, success, or clarity. Some people bloom early, some bloom later, and some bloom after completely losing themselves first. None of these paths are failures. They are simply paths. When you stop asking, "Am I ahead?" and start asking, "Am I aligned?" everything changes. Alignment brings peace because it reconnects you to what matters to you, not what impresses others. Alignment makes choices simpler because you are no longer optimizing for applause. Alignment makes life feel lighter because you're no longer running toward an invisible finish line. You're walking toward your values. In 2026, inner peace will not come from winning the race. It will come from realizing there was never a race to begin with. Lesson 4. Stop carrying old resentments. Resentment is a form of emotional debt, a debt you keep paying long after the original event has passed. It might begin with a wound, a disappointment, a betrayal, or a moment where you were unseen or misunderstood. The initial pain is real, but resentment is not the pain itself. Resentment is what happens when the pain becomes replayed, preserved, and kept alive in the nervous system. It freezes a past moment into the present and forces you to relive it without resolution. Anger may feel empowering at first, but when held for too long, it becomes a weight you carry everywhere. Many people misunderstand forgiveness because they think it means minimizing harm or excusing what happened. But Buddhism offers a gentler truth. Forgiveness is not about rewriting the story. It is about releasing the burden. It is not about saying, "It didn't matter." It is about saying, "It no longer needs to live inside me." The real question is not, did they deserve forgiveness? But rather, do I deserve peace? Forgiveness is self-care disguised as mercy. It is less about virtue and more about nervous system regulation. When resentment lingers, the body pays for it. You feel it in the shoulders, the jaw, the breath that never fully drops into the belly. This tension is not punishment, it is protection. The nervous system stays alert, trying to defend you from a threat that no longer exists. When you let go of resentment, you are not doing it for the other person. You are doing it for your nervous system, for your sleep, for your ability to feel light again. The identity shift here is subtle yet powerful. I release this, not for them, but for me. You are allowed to move forward without carrying every wound as proof of what happened. In 2026, inner peace will belong to those who learn to set down what hurts, not because it was small, but because their heart deserves more space than resentment allows. Lesson 5. Stop believing productivity worth. One of the most harmful beliefs people carry into adulthood is the idea that their value depends on how much they produce. Society does not teach this directly, it rewards it. It praises output, accomplishment, speed, and constant motion. From a young age, many people learn that being busy means being valuable, that slowing down means falling behind, and that rest must be justified like a luxury instead of recognized as a biological need. Over time, worth becomes conditional. You feel good about yourself when you are achieving, and uncertain about yourself when you are not. But there is a cost to living like a machine. When productivity becomes tied to self-worth, rest transforms into guilt. Silence becomes uncomfortable. Days without output feel like failures instead of invitations to breathe. The nervous system stays in constant activation, unable to differentiate danger from deadlines. This is how a culture collapses into burnout without realizing it. And yet Buddhism has been pointing to a different truth for thousands of years. Value is not in performance, it is in presence. A person is not worthwhile because of what they produce, but because of who they are when they are fully alive and aware. The shift coming into 2026 is not more doing, it is more inhabiting. Inhabiting your breath, inhabiting your body, inhabiting your relationships, inhabiting the small moments that productivity culture teaches you to overlook. Stillness does not make you less valuable. It reconnects you to your humanity. There is wisdom that can only be heard when you stop filling every minute with noise and tasks. There is clarity that only emerges when the mind is not sprinting to the next obligation. The identity shift here is simple, yet revolutionary. My worth is not negotiated by output. You are allowed to rest without earning it. You are allowed to be valuable without performing. You are allowed to exist without producing. In 2026, inner peace will belong to those who stop treating themselves like a project to complete and start treating themselves like a life to experience. Lesson 6. Stop expecting others to meet your unspoken needs. Many disappointments in life come not from what people actually do, but from what we secretly expect them to do without ever saying it. You may hope that if someone loves you, they should automatically know how to comfort you, how to show care, how to communicate in difficult moments, or how to show up when you are hurting. But unspoken needs turn relationships into silent tests. Expectation without communication almost always results in disappointment, not because the relationship is broken, but because the other person was never told the role they were expected to play. The reality is that people do not respond according to our needs. They respond according to their own awareness, history, conditioning, fears, and emotional skill level. Someone who was raised in a home where feelings were dismissed may struggle to offer validation. Someone who learned that vulnerability is unsafe may shut down instead of opening up. Someone trained to solve problems may struggle to simply listen. None of this is personal. It is human. When we forget this truth, we create fantasies about how others should love, support, or understand us. And when the fantasy collapses, the disappointment feels like betrayal. The path toward peace begins by shifting from fantasy to clarity to boundaries. Fantasy asks why they do not know what I need. Clarity asks, have I expressed what I need? Boundaries ask, if they cannot meet what I need, how do I protect my inner world? This change transforms relationships from confusing and emotionally heavy into honest and grounded. Buddhism teaches that suffering arises when we attach our inner peace to external conditions. Expecting others to meet needs they never agreed to meet is one of those conditions. This does not mean lowering standards or abandoning desire. It means seeing people as they are, rather than as imagined characters in your internal story. Clarity does not guarantee transformation, but it provides information. It reveals whether someone has the willingness, capacity, or awareness to show up for you. With that information, you can act with wisdom instead of resentment. The identity shift here is strong. My needs matter, and so does reality. When this becomes your internal stance, you stop assuming, stop waiting, and stop silently suffering. You ask, you communicate, you choose. In 2026, peace will belong to those who stop depending on emotional mind reading and instead build relationships through communication, honesty, and compassionate boundaries. Lesson 7. Stop fearing uncertainty. The human mind loves prediction. It finds comfort in knowing what comes next and reassurance in believing that life can be mapped out, prepared for, and controlled through careful planning. This is not foolishness. It is biology. The mind equates predictability with safety because unpredictability once meant danger. But in modern life, uncertainty is rarely a threat to survival. It is simply a space the mind has not yet filled with answers. When we forget this distinction, uncertainty begins to feel like danger, even when nothing harmful is happening. Buddhism teaches that impermanence is the only constant. Everything changes. Everything moves, everything unfolds, with or without our permission. Yet suffering arises when we insist that life provide guarantees before we allow ourselves to relax, enjoy, or participate fully. So many people postpone happiness until things make sense. They wait for clarity before they commit, for certainty before they begin, for perfect conditions before they act. But clarity rarely appears before movement. It often waits on the other side of action, not the other way around. The shift toward inner peace comes from redefining uncertainty. Uncertainty does not mean danger. Uncertainty means possibility. It means that the future is not fixed, that outcomes are still alive, that experiences can still surprise you. It means your story is not finished. When you fear uncertainty, you collapse your own potential. You limit yourself to what is known and familiar. But familiarity is not the same as safety, and predictability is not the same as peace. A powerful reframe in moments of uncertainty is to shift the question. The anxious mind asks, what will happen? The wiser mind asks, how will I meet what happens? This shift moves the focus from control to capacity. Instead of seeking guarantees, you cultivate trust in your own ability to respond, adapt, and learn. The more you build that inner confidence, the less you demand certainty from the world around you. In 2026, peace will belong to those who walk forward without needing the full map before they take the first step. You do not need to know how every chapter ends. You do not need to predict every outcome. You only need to meet each moment with awareness instead of fear. Life is not meant to be solved like a puzzle. It is meant to be lived like a journey. When you stop fearing uncertainty, You stop waiting for your life to begin. Lesson 8. Stop seeking constant validation. There is a quiet hunger many people carry without realizing it. The need to be approved of, praised, seen, and affirmed by others. This hunger begins early. As children, approval meant safety and belonging. As adults, it can evolve into a subtle form of dependence. You may catch yourself watching how others react to your choices, scanning for signs that you are doing life correctly, or feeling unsettled when appreciation is missing. This constant search for validation creates an identity that is fragile because it is built on feedback rather than self-understanding. When your worth depends on approval, your entire emotional world becomes unstable. Praise feels uplifting, but only temporarily. Criticism feels devastating. Silence feels like rejection. The nervous system becomes trained to look outward for confirmation instead of inward for truth. And when approval becomes the source of worth, self-expression begins to shift into performance. You start shaping your words, choices, and behaviors to match what others expect. You say yes when you mean no. You minimize your own desires to avoid conflict. You become agreeable instead of authentic. This is not kindness. This is self-abandonment. Buddhism teaches that suffering arises when the self attaches to impermanent things. Approval is incredibly impermanent. It changes with moods, circumstances, and personal biases. Some will approve of you for qualities others dislike. Some will admire you for choices others criticize. If you build your identity on applause, you become a reflection of external opinions rather than an expression of your own values. That is why validation can never satisfy the hunger it creates. It works like salt water. The more you drink, the thirstier you become. The path toward inner peace begins with a shift from external applause to self-respect. Self-respect does not always feel comfortable, but it is always grounding. It asks you to do what is aligned, not what is liked. It invites you to make decisions based on your values, rather than on the reactions you expect to receive. Self-respect means staying true to yourself even when approval is absent. And living this way creates a different kind of stability, one that cannot be taken away by silence or disapproval. A powerful transformation occurs when inner permission begins replacing outer permission. Inner permission is what allows you to rest without productivity. It allows you to set boundaries without guilt. It allows you to pursue paths that make sense to your heart, even if others do not understand them. When you give yourself permission to exist without performance, your nervous system no longer spikes with fear at the thought of being misunderstood. You remain rooted in yourself, not in your audience. In 2026, peace will belong to those who stop outsourcing their worth. Validation may feel sweet, but it is not nourishment. Approval may feel pleasant, but it is not identity. When you stop performing for acceptance, life becomes quieter, more honest, and far more your own. Lesson 9. Stop rushing against time. One of the most pervasive anxieties in modern life is the feeling of being behind. Behind in success, behind in relationships, behind in clarity, behind in healing, behind in purpose. This feeling does not arise naturally. It is culturally programmed. Society teaches that life unfolds according to a timeline, that achievement must happen early, that milestones should be met by certain ages, and that meaning arrives only after boxes have been checked. This creates quiet panic in the human heart. You begin to view time as a competitor instead of a companion, and you race through your life as though you are running out of it. When you internalize the belief that you are behind, you stop inhabiting the present. Conversations become rushed. Mornings become chaotic. Beauty becomes invisible. Even rest becomes contaminated with guilt, because resting feels like losing progress. This mindset is exhausting, not because time is actually running out, but because you have been taught to measure life by clocks instead of attention. In Buddhism, time is not a countdown. Time is an experience. It is not the number of moments that makes a life rich, but the depth of awareness within them. Consider how time expands during a beautiful sunset, or while listening to someone you love speak slowly from the heart. In those moments, minutes feel full, generous, and complete. Now consider how quickly time disappears when you are distracted, stressed, or racing through tasks without presence. Hours vanish, but nothing is truly lived. This is the difference between a life measured by duration and a life measured by attention. When attention is shallow, time feels scarce. When attention is deep, time feels abundant. The shift toward peace in 2026 is not about managing time more efficiently. It is about changing how you relate to time altogether. When you stop treating your life as a race and start treating it as an unfolding experience, the pressure softens. Instead of asking, what deadline am I racing toward, you begin asking, what moment am I inhabiting? Instead of optimizing every hour for productivity, you begin allowing certain hours to exist without being justified. This is not laziness, this is presence. There is also a profound identity shift here. People who feel behind often believe their value is tied to speed. They think faster equals better. But wisdom does not follow speed. Growth does not follow speed. Even healing does not follow speed. Trees do not rush their roots. Flowers do not resent their timing. And no two lives unfold in the same rhythm. Some awaken early. Some awaken late. Some awaken only after losing everything they once thought they needed. None of these paths are mistakes. You are not late. You are here. And here is the only place where life actually happens. When you stop rushing against time, time stops rushing against you. Presence returns. Depth returns. And peace quietly follows. Lesson 10. Stop demanding complete clarity. There is a quiet pressure many people carry into adulthood, especially during times of transition or self-reflection. The pressure to figure everything out, to know who they are, to know where they are going, to know what they want, to know how their life should unfold. This pressure often hides beneath sentences like, I need to get my life together, or I should know by now. It feels responsible, but beneath it lives anxiety, self-judgment, and the belief that uncertainty is a sign of failure. This belief suffocates curiosity. It erases play. It replaces exploration with urgency. The mind demands clarity because it fears vulnerability. When the future is uncertain, the mind cannot predict. And when it cannot predict, it feels unsafe. But wisdom does not come from forcing answers. Wisdom arises from observation, from watching your desires shift, from noticing what brings tension and what brings ease, from paying attention to the small signals that appear long before the big decisions make sense. In Buddhism, clarity is not something you hunt down with discipline or force. It is something that emerges naturally when the mind stops gripping so tightly. Many people postpone participation in their own life until clarity arrives. They wait to begin until they are certain. They wait to love until they are certain. They wait to create until they are certain. But clarity often does not show up before the journey. It shows up because of the journey. You cannot discover your path by planning it from a distance. You discover it by walking, by experimenting, by making choices and learning from the ones that do not fit. This requires tolerance for uncertainty, not the elimination of it. When you demand complete clarity, you make life feel like a puzzle. You assume there is a singular correct answer to every chapter and that your role is to solve it. But life is not a puzzle. Life is an unfolding process. It is shaped by timing, conditions, relationships, experiences, and awareness that cannot be predicted from the starting point. What feels confusing today may feel obvious tomorrow. What feels undesirable now may become meaningful later. Nothing about this is linear, and yet the demand for certainty tries to force life into a straight line. Allowing uncertainty gives space for direction to emerge at its own pace. When you stop rushing insight, the nervous system relaxes, curiosity comes back, creativity returns. You begin to notice what you are drawn toward rather than what you are running away from. The question changes from what is the right answer to what feels aligned right now. This shift removes pressure from the future and anchors you in the present, where decisions are actually made. The identity shift here is powerful. You stop measuring your worth by how clear your future looks. You stop treating confusion as failure. You stop believing that not knowing means being lost. Some of the most important seasons of growth happen in the in-between spaces, when life is rearranging silently beneath the surface. In 2026, peace will belong to those who allow uncertainty to exist without demanding immediate resolution. Instead of trying to figure everything out, they learn to meet the next moment with awareness and let the path reveal itself one step at a time. Peace is rarely found in adding more to your life. It is found in subtracting what no longer needs to be carried. The mind searches for improvement through accumulation, but the heart finds relief through release. As you set down the old pressures, outdated expectations, and invisible burdens you have been holding, something subtle begins to shift. Lightness does not come from becoming better, but from becoming less burdened. It comes from allowing things to drop that were never meant to be carried for so long. Each thing you let go of creates room for breath and clarity, room for your nervous system to soften, room for intuition to speak, room for your presence to return to your own life. Letting go is not a single moment. It is a rhythm, a practice, a quiet decision made again and again in the direction of peace. Some releases will feel immediate. Others will unwind slowly across months or years. Both are valid. Both are human. As you move into 2026, consider a new approach to life. Walk slower, trust more, and demand less from the world around you. You do not need every answer to participate in your own story. You do not need perfect certainty to take the next step. You do not need to prove your worth through speed, performance, or control. You are allowed to live at a human pace. You are allowed to rest without guilt. You are allowed to arrive without rushing. If you are listening to this at night, let this land gently. Allow the mind to loosen its grip on what it has been trying to solve. Allow the body to settle into the support beneath it. Allow the breath to drop lower without force. Peace is not something you earn. It is something you uncover when you stop fighting every moment of your life. You are not late. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are here. And here is where peace begins.